to Franchi Talks Japanese Art. I'm Franchi and it's been a while, but I'm so happy to be back with a new video. And today's video was inspired by the seasons. Because lately, if you live in the same hemisphere as I do, you probably noticed that it's autumn now. And at first, I have to say, I was not exactly happy about this. I was longing for summer. But then I started reading this book. It's called Flowers of the East, Art and Poetry, Metaphors and Symbols in the Artistic and Literary Culture of Japan by Donatella Failla. And I was actually really inspired. This book talks about all kind of plants and uh, flowers that have play a big role in Japanese art. And it's divided by seasons, so I started reading from autumn. It's what seemed to make to me the most sense to start from the season in which we are. And I found myself really inspired. It's very beautifully written, very poetic, with some great pictures of art. If you can read Italian, I recommend it. But anyhow, it also gave me an idea for today's video in which I thought let's start from what I was reading, let's look at plants and flowers that are specific to the autumn season in Japanese art, and then let's also look at some artworks which feature these plants, which come from some major collections of Japanese art. So if you see sounds interesting to you, feel free to stick around and let's jump right in. Let's start by saying that in Japanese art, autumn has a kind of a feeling of loneliness, almost decline. It makes sense because we can think of a lot of plants dying, leaves falling, so it has this kind of melancholic feelings. But at the same time, there are a lot of flowers and weeds that bloom in this season with often kind of colorful petals and leaves. And so all these vibrant colors and also the colors of the leaves falling, which are full of reds and oranges, they can also convey feelings of passion and lust. So we will see some of these themes through the video. Let's start with a beautiful and beloved plant in Japan. It is the Japanese maple, Acer japonicum. This tree, as you probably all have seen it in autumn, gets a beautiful foliage full of red, orange and yellow shades. And I've chosen a painting which represents this tree. It's by Mori Tetsuan. It's a hanging scroll painted with inks on silk, and I think it's really beautiful. It conveys very autumny feelings. We can see maple trees and then 5 deer which are beside a water stream. And the maple with deers is a very characteristic depiction in Japanese art which represents the autumn season. This is because deers mate in autumn and therefore it's probable to see male deer wandering through the woods looking for mates. And they also make a very specific sound to call out for mates. And so they're often represented together, the maple trees and the deers. In this case, I like that this painting is, let's say, much of the space is dedicated to the maple tree. In fact, we can see that almost all of the top part, the 2/3 are all tree. And we can see at the very top how much foliage it is represented. The painter really took care to depict so many little leaves individually, and we can also see there is some kind of shading of the leaves from red to orange. And also what I really like is of course the representation of the deers, because I think that they were represented in a very naturalistic way. Their poses are so lifelike, how they're drinking from the stream or munching on some mushrooms. I think it's really nice. And Also, their fur is really rendered through each brush stroke, and it looks really realistic, making some kind of contrast with the brush strokes used to represent other elements, for example, the rocks. All in all, I think it's a really nice scroll. Let's look at another object where the maple plays the main role in the decoration. And this time we're looking at an outer robe, uchikake. This kind of garment is worn on top of other garments without a belt, and it started being used around the 16th century. It sprang from habit of the ruling classes to wear this kind of outer robe over their other garments. And with time, it also became a staple in the wardrobes of women of samurai families. But our robe is from the 20th century, and it was probably made for a young woman of the upper classes. The name uchikake comes from the verb uchikakeru, which means to drape upon. As we mentioned, and as we all can see, the protagonist of this robe is the maple tree. The branches spawn from left to right, from top to bottom, and they're covered in beautiful leaves which go from shades of red to tones of orange and yellow. The maple is done through embroidery, and I'm really amazed by the how they could convey such shading of each color through, like, from one color to the next through embroidery. I think it's done so delicately. It's really amazing. On the right side, you can also see some chrysanthemum flowers, and both the maple leaves and the chrysanthemum were rendered through embroidery of silk and metallic thread. And at the bottom of the robe, we see the depiction of a stream of water. On the blue water, we can see some white spots, and these were rendered through a tie-dye technique called kano ko shibori, which means fawn spots tie-dye. And we can see that in this case it was painstakingly applied on the textile. It's really rendered with the mastery of this craft. The depiction of the maple tree with a stream is actually also a characteristic depiction of the autumn season, and very often found in Japanese applied arts, because it refers to the river Tatsuda, which is always depicted covered by foliage of the maple leaves. They are planted along the river, and in autumn all their leaves fall in the river. And it is also interesting to note, because we are looking at a textile object, that the river Tatsuta during the autumn, when it's covered with maple leaves, is often described as a drape made of brocade. And I will read you a poem, a super short poem, connected to this. For example, one of them reads: On the Tatsuta River, the radiant leaves are scattered and float as if suspended. If I cross it, will this sumptuous drape of brocade shatter? And we can also see some artworks which show this connection between poetry and the Tatsuta River. For example, we can look at this woodblock print by Kuniyoshi, which represents the poet Ariwara no Narihira, which is sitting on the banks of the Tatsuta River with two friends, two companions, and they look at the river, and they're covered by fallen leaves and leaves falling. I think it's a really beautiful depiction, kind of wishing I was there. Let's look at the second plant of today, and this time I want to look at the chrysanthemum, which is really the king of autumn in Japan. It's the star of this season. Since the ancient times, both in China and Japan, chrysanthemums have been attributed medical properties, as well as many symbolical meanings. This is because the chrysanthemum blooms in autumn, and even during frost and very cold temperature it won't lose its petals. And for this reason it is often been connected to the ideas of longevity and immortality. The relation to immortality and longevity has also been told in a legend that is popular both in China and Japan, and it's the story of Kiku Jido. Kiku Jido was an attendant at the court of the Emperor Muang during the Zhou dynasty. And one day he committed a terrible mistake. He tripped on a pillow. And the Emperor Muang, he could not forgive this mistake and relegated him to he decided to have him exiliated to the land of chrysanthemums, where it was basically implied that the boy would die there. But defeating all expectations, Kikujido did not starve and he did not die. This is because he was drinking the dew that would accumulate on the petals of chrysanthemums. And this dew actually proved to make him immortal. The boy could keep on living there without aging. We can see Kikujido in this woodblock print by Kitagawa Utamaro. And I really like how he is depicted because there are, of course, innumerable woodblock prints representing Kikujido. Usually, he is represented in his whole body, surrounded by chrysanthemum plants, for example, at his side. But in this case, I feel like the focus is really on his face and on his, let's say, top half. We can see, I think, I try to interpret this his expression. In my opinion, he's smiling. He's a little bit cheeky because he's thinking how the tides have turned. That terrible punishment by the Emperor Muang has turned for him into a great fortune because he gained eternal youth. We can also see symbols which connect him to this story. For example, he is holding this pillow, and also he's beautifully surrounded by chrysanthemum flowers. I actually really like this. The way that I see it, I don't know if this is an official interpretation, is that it almost looks as if he's peeking through the chrysanthemum flowers, as if he's looking from the land of chrysanthemums onto us, which I also really like, and I don't see this style very often. Let's look at another object which features chrysanthemum flowers, which are after all very common and beloved when it comes to decorative art. Let's look at this sake ewer, which I think is a really mm, outstanding object. Let's first um, define a couple of words. This is a ewer for sake, which, just in case you don't know, is Japanese rice wine. And the other thing is the fact let's define that I said it's lacquered. So what is lacquer? Lacquer, just in case you don't know, it's a organic coating material which is made with the sap of a tree, which is Lacquer verniciflum. And lacquer can be applied onto a variety of materials. Oftentimes we are talking about wood, and it is a process which is carried out by specialized craftsmen and which can take months, if not at times years of work. It involves a variety of steps which start from selecting the wood, drying it down, shaping it, making it smooth, applying several coats of lacquer, and finally also decorating it, often with mother of pearl or other precious materials such as precious metals, thinking of gold and silver mostly. And in fact, our object we're looking at right now too was decorated with such precious materials such as gold and silver. We can see that the entirety of the body has been covered with gold dust, a technique called in Japanese makie. This golden powder has been sprinkled over the whole of the body of the ewer. And then this golden powder was also used to create designs. It was sprinkled more to achieve a more denser coverage, which results in the chrysanthemum flowers and in the streams. So we can see that the artists here went for a decoration of chrysanthemum flowers we mentioned and streams of water. And this is a very beloved and characteristic motif. It's called in Japanese Kiku, so chrysanthemum and water. Both in China and Japan, there was this tradition of drinking rice wine infused with chrysanthemum petals. In Japan, it's called kikuzake, and of course, it was drunk for its alleged properties of longevity and thinking that it would be good for your health. So it is very befitting to find the depiction of chrysanthemum on a sake ewer. And I can imagine that it would have been really appreciated even if used not to serve chrysanthemum sake, kikuzake, but even just to serve regular sake as a kind of auspicious motif. And I can imagine using this ewer to serve warm sake on a chilly autumn day. I can really get into that mood. We mentioned at the beginning of this video that autumn is often connected to feelings of loneliness and melancholy. And there is one grass of autumn that is often connected to these feelings. And the name is the Japanese bush clover, in Japanese Hagi. And Hagi is often depicted in art connected to the solitude that stems from unrequited love and the ephemery of life. We can see these feelings represented in a woodblock print by Suzuki Harunobu. The protagonist of this woodblock print is a young woman who is plucking a branch of a bush, which is of course the hagi with its lilac flowers, and she is accompanied by a maid. And the way the bush gently curves down, and in general the whole atmosphere is very conveys feelings of loneliness, of melancholy, and it has a really pensive mood. We can see that the maid who is accompanying the young woman, she is not looking at her, kind of giving her some privacy in her suffering, but at the same time this is also sad because it conveys the idea that this young woman is really isolated in her pain. At the top of the woodblock print there is written a poem. This poem dates from the 13th century and it's by the poet Fujiwara Kinmori, and it reads as such. Bush clover, my heart is withered. Even the dew on the branches of bush clover is futile in the autumn evening. And we have to say that this kind of representation of the pain and the traveling of young people, of young lovers, is a staple in the production of Suzuki Harunobu, who can always depict these feelings with such delicateness, and it's really I really like it. I'm a very emotional person, so I get involved in these feelings. And he often also adds poems from the ancient, from the previous, from the past, uh, which double down on these feelings. But I feel like it creates a very good connection between the person who views the print and the protagonists depicted in these art pieces. The hagi is not the only grass of autumn which is beloved in Japan, uh, but there is seven famous grasses which are the seven grasses of autumn, the Aki no Nanakusa. And I found a painting which depicts some of them by Suga Kisui. And We have to say that these kind of grasses they were beloved by Japanese poets and artists because they they grew spontaneously in the fields and they gave an appearance of wildness and abundance because of course they grow in big amounts in a field, but at the same time they can also convey feelings of melancholy when they wither. In this painting, we can see the Hagi that we saw before, just a minute ago, of course, and it is accompanied by the Suzuki grass, which you can see it's the tall one that goes a little bit downwards with some white little leaves, soft leaves, and then we can see the Fuji Bakama, which is the purple one that splits at the top in lots of little branches with purple flowers, and then we can see the Kikyo, which is this kind of weed with this star-shaped blue flower. To complete the Aki no Nanakusa, there should also be the Nadeshiko, Kudzu, and Ominaeshi, which are not represented, unfortunately, in this painting, because oftentimes we find different grasses represented on decorative arts or painting. They can also be substituted with each other, but in general, I think it's really beautiful, a really nice idea that artists would just fall in love and give so many significance to flowers, to grasses that would just grow spontaneously in the fields, which in many cases might be considered weeds. So that was it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed looking at all these plants with me and all these beautiful objects. I hope that I made you feel also a little bit inspired, maybe to go on some walks in some autumn parks or woods. I already did that yesterday. And if you like this video, if you felt, as I said, a little bit inspired, make sure to subscribe to see more. You can also choose to support the channel by giving a donation. There is a Ko-Fi link in the description of this video for that. And also if you wanna stay in touch with me, you can feel free to follow me on Facebook or Instagram. All the links are in the description box. But for now, I just hope to see you again soon. Bye!